Life on other planets, it's distinctly possible, yes, but I find it very curious, and this is one of the niggling questions that keeps nagging at me, is the fact we're always so far away. You look at all these planets, all of them, and let's be honest, they're dead. They're dead. As far as we know, there's no life. And the further we look, you know, these scientists say, these astronomers, they say, oh, look, there's an Earth-like planet, God knows, zillions of light years away. Well, they're comfortable with that because it's unreachable. And even at the speed of light, it would still take us hundreds of years to reach them if they're zillions of light years away. I think we're looking at something that operates on multiple levels of reality. I believe in the interdimensional hypothesis. Maybe this force or this energy is utilizing or bringing itself into our field frequency of reality, and we see it as we translate it. So maybe we're not seeing it for what it really is, because this is not able to translate the whole information as best it can. The most difficult thing about ufology is the controversial nature. Definitely the controversial nature, because it's so elusive and it always appears to be one step ahead. But certainly if you document an account or you publish an account based on an incident, you will have absolutely hundreds of people attacking the testimony or tearing it to pieces. Some are forgiving, but for the majority they will pass it off as an explainable phenomena, atmospheric distortions, light refractions, secret technology. They will go through everything other than what it might possibly be.
I can tell you a story. We had, as a family, a normal working class background, very strict Victorian upbringing, if you like. And we moved to a new home on the edge of a small village. We had neighbours that were disabled, and our last job of the day for myself and my younger brother was to take our dog for a walk and the neighbour's dog who couldn't manage their dogs. We'd put the dogs away, say goodnight to our parents, go to bed. That was the normal routine. On this particular night, it was probably early September, it was dusk, put the dogs away, went into the front garden, and I'm talking a lot of years ago, we're talking 1968. So there was no light pollution like there is now, there was no police or ambulance helicopters, there wasn't even, I would say, a quarter of the air traffic. And my father was in the front garden. We went to say goodnight, and as we were looking, our house faced due east. The sky to the north was completely covered in cloud, but it finished with a really thick but abrupt band of cloud, and then the whole of the sky to the south was clear. The main constellations were just about beginning to appear. And my father, he wasn't an astronomer, but he was interested and liked to involve the children. And as we're looking at the sky and he's pointing, 2 UFOs came fast out of this bank of cloud and then just stopped dead. There was no sound, no anything. They were brilliant pearly white, and when they were still, they were perfectly spherical. And the one nearest to the cloud, you could actually see the light. They were so brilliant, you could see the light from it reflecting off the surface of the cloud. As that happened, I got a voice in my head, quite clearly, a sort of, I can only describe as a gentle masculine voice, and I don't know why, it just happened. And it was a thought directly into my head that, oops, we hadn't meant to have been seen, we hadn't meant to have come out the cloud. Now, I got that as a friendly thought in my head, quite strongly, and I don't know why I would say it was masculine or friendly, but that was the impression that I got. They remained stationary for a few seconds, and then staying in the same relative position to each other, they moved directly away from us towards Thorpe Marsh Power Station, which was about 8 to 9 miles as the crow flies. And they immediately were moving fast. There was no acceleration, same as there was no deceleration when they stopped. They came out very quickly, then were still.
There is the consensus that these forces or beings or these objects, people call them UFOs or UAPs, it's the same thing in my eyes. But it could be that these energies or these forces, as they come into our reality, as they slow their vibrational frequencies down, then they may utilize certain parts of this matrix to build themselves up. Philip Mantle, I spoke to Philip Mantle about this, and he said, a simulation, Philip. A simulation, like the Borg. And I said, it's possible. We have to look at all theories of how they do it, because this is the only way they're able to interact with us on a so-called physical level.
What is it?
So they moved away. We probably only had them in sight for a minute, something thereabouts, and there was no sound whatsoever. The three of us were sort of sat there, mouths agape, looking at the sky as you would. And my father was the first to speak. He'd done his national service with the RAF, and he said, there's nothing that we've got that can do that. I always say, when I've investigated things since then, that when people do see something like that, it's so obvious that it's alien, for want of a better term. It's so obvious that it's not from Earth. It's so obvious that it's so bizarre, so odd, that it has to be from somewhere else. Immediately I wanted to know, how come I don't know about it? How can that be in our skies, moving about like that, and it's not being reported? Why isn't it in the newspapers? Why isn't it on the television? It made you realise how insignificant we are. It's life-changing, really. You instantly know that we are not alone. It's so obvious that it's alien, for want of a better term.
There is nothing that I could bring to the table to convince someone of that reality. I think on a personal level, they themselves would have to go through an experience, either seeing a departed loved one who has passed over, seeing a UFO, or going through some form of strange paranormal activity. And I hate the word paranormal because I think it's quite normal. It's just that because human thought is so rigidly controlled, the brain is a remarkable organism, and we've been contained and controlled since birth to only see things that the system wants us to believe is real. I would just say to the person, have an open mind. This is the trouble, and it's not a bad thing with our race. We've become not paranoid, guarded. And of course, if these angelic beings arrived in ships all over the world and they came down bestowing wonderment and technological advancement, we would suspect be a catch. I mean, it could be possible that they're just giving, but from our perspective, we would be armed with the knowledge that we have to be very guarded. Life doesn't make any sense to me, because what does it mean to be you? What does it mean to be in this universe? What's holding everything together? You know, and you're not going to tell me that in this vastness of this deep chasm of space that there is nothing else, because we just don't know what is holding space together. And what's at the edge of space? Where does it end? Does it go into a kind of like a loop? And if that's the case, where's the other side of it? The way that I see this is that we are probably dealing with multiple dimensions of reality. I always give an example here. Think of your mobile phone. People say, you know, being a clairvoyant medium, or you talk to the dead. No, I don't talk to anyone. They utilize that information through me as a conduit. My job is to bring the information through as best that I can with a yes or no. Your mobile phone is a physical piece of equipment. It has a signal coming through it that you can't see. That signal is emanating within what we call the ether. And there are probably multiple dimensions of reality with those signals. And the signal is then broken down to a language that we can understand in this form, in where we are. In its primary state, we wouldn't know what it's saying unless we were matched with that signature, with that frequency, and then we'll be in that world. If we could find out what they are, or if there was contact on a mutual platform, I'm not saying they snatch people in the dead of light and do horrible things to them, is if we met them face to face, could they give us some answers to the questions we're seeking? Like the universe. Would they be any wiser? They may not. They might, I would think they would be a little bit wiser. But there again, are they also interdimensional?
Oh my God, what was that?
For me personally, as a researcher with a theoretical content, it seems to show me that we're not just dealing with UFOs here. This for me has opened up areas of consciousness, studies in consciousness, studies in near-death experience, in life after death, in spirit communication, the soul, creation. This brings into the equation of the universe because, you know, we all try and pigeonhole them into boxes. There's UFOs, UAPs, there's cryptids, there's life after death, but there is a common connection between each of them because I believe that, you know, we're only beginning to now understanding these very complex areas of research and trying to make parallels between one and the other one. For instance, as an example, Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, an example is that, you know, big wolves are seen there, orbs are seen there, cattle mutilation. So what we have to do is we have to look at the phenomena and see what is behind it, why is it doing what it's doing.
In a dark room, smoke becomes visible only when struck by light rays. Every living thing gives off invisible heat energy, but the people hiding in this forest become visible only on infrared film, which records heat waves. An ingenious device, the interferometer, can split a beam of light and recombine it in alternating bands. Energy waves that men cannot normally see, such as the heat zones around a candle flame, become visible. With the interferometer, gases and vapors become apparent as they stream into the air.
In the electromagnetic spectrum, very briefly, you have the radio waves at the top end. Then it comes down through the infrared to the visible light that we see in our normal acoustic spectrum that we hear. That's what we deal with on a daily basis. Then it goes down through the ultraviolet, X-rays and gamma rays at the lower end. Now that's just the bit that we know about. Out of that bit that we know about, it's less than 1/10 of 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. And out of that, you've got cosmologists and these other people with far better brains than I that are now saying 95% or as much as 95% of the universe is made up of dark matter and dark energy that we can't even measure. We're only looking at 1/10 of 1% of the 5%. So there's no wonder that we're sort of at a loss and we're not able to rationalise what we're seeing because we completely don't understand it. I mean, it's wonderful that NASA have got Hubble and they're looking at normal visible light, but they can look at infrared and ultraviolet as well, but that's still only a very narrow wavelength of what the whole spectrum is available. And because at the moment we don't have the technology that looks into dark energy or dark matter, there's that whole breadth of frequencies out there that we can't even begin to look at the moment.
No, I think that us seeking life is interesting and needs to be done, but the level of UFO research now is telling us that from the way we see it, it's not out there, it's through there.
Interdimensional travel is still a hypothesis. I mean, it's not proven, but it's likely, very likely, and the scientists are smart. They are now talking about them. You know, alternative worlds brushing against ours or other realities.
If you imagine our electromagnetic spectrum as an LP, the old-fashioned record that goes on a turntable. So that is the frequency that we're on. This dark energy and dark matter are not on our frequency, they're not on our record, and they can be the record above us and above that and above that. And we are in the middle of a whole stack of records. And within that stack of records is the whole of the electromagnetic spectrum, including dark energy and dark matter. And we're just in the middle of it. So we have frequencies and we have worlds, if you like, and universes on either side of us and higher up and down in the frequencies. So ET is able to tune their frequency to us, and that's how they interact with us, and then they're able to tune out of it and back to where they came from.
You look at this in a whole new context when you think about our solar system, our cosmos, because where they come from, they may not have a cosmos. A dimension may be completely alien and different to our set of laws. So we have to think about what their world would be like rather than what we are. We're used to the three-dimensional world. This is, as we call it, three-dimensional, whereas if they're fourth or fifth, or another dimension, it might be very different, and they may not be based on the atom as we are. Something I worked out as I was researching my book was the fact that it would make sense that the planets and everything more or less is round or circular, because we're based on the atom. The atom is circular and it's constantly moving. The atom always moves. That's why everything is in motion, even to the tiniest cell. So we're based on this frequency. They may be based entirely on a different set of rules that are alien to us. I've argued also that if they are interdimensional, perhaps they may not be corporal. They become corporal when they enter our realm. Many questions.
I believe that they're in their own little pocket of universe, their little piece of matter, that we can just see part of it as they come down through our electromagnetic spectrum. Therefore, there's no G-forces because they're in their own little pocket of the universe. They're not moving, and it's all done by their thought. When you see these, I won't say stooges, but the word springs to mind on the television interviews that say there was no heat plume, there was no visible flight surfaces, it was like rubbish. That don't even come into it. They don't need that. So therefore speed and all these maneuvers are totally irrelevant. Speed don't go into it when you're not moving. Speed don't come into it, G-force don't come into it. There's no physical attachment to our gravity. So all this, they wouldn't survive that, or they wouldn't find that, or how can something move and then just stop dead? Totally irrelevant. They're not using our physics.
In hindsight, you will always have those devout followers, like myself as well, who will look into this very heavily. But you will certainly have those who will mock it. They may stand before you and say, oh yes, absolutely true, but behind the scenes, I think it's a load of rubbish. Or they approach and they're wearing the crocodile grin. They smile at you, but really, behind all that, they just think it's nonsense, which is fair enough.
I always say I wouldn't blame anybody for being sceptical. However, you can't just dismiss it because you haven't experienced it.
You know, through human arrogance, we assume that we are the intelligent species in the entire cosmos. I've never believed that. Never, not for once.
There's a lot more out there than we know about. You imagine any race that might be even only 1,000 years in front of us, how much more technically advanced they could be. So it would be, in my opinion, much easier to hide themselves, and they wouldn't use necessarily the normal electromagnetic frequencies that we are used to and that we can measure.
The question is there a way by which someone's emotions might be manipulated at a distance through some form of electromagnetic means? And the answer to that is very probably yes. I discovered there was an operation in the Reagan years called Sleeping Beauty, which asked the question, can we use certain forms of electromagnetic fields in terrorist and hostage situations? Could we, for example, discombobulate a terrorist by electromagnetic means for just a couple of minutes, just the time to allow a SWAT team to come in and free his hostages? And I know that there are experiments carried out in Canada under US government financing. We already have demonstrated, it's been in laboratories, that animals' behavior can be modified with certain very precise electromagnetic fields. There's a man in Spain who has, it's fascinating, he has two pools of fighting fish divided by a glass, and they're trying to kill each other. He puts a certain field on, and all of a sudden they turn into pussycats. They stop fighting. I think in many ways, we have made so much progress in the last decade in understanding how the human mind works. This is going to bring enormous benefits to man. But like all of our great scientific leaps forward, there is the other side of the coin. Many people think that neurologists today are where atomic physicists were in 1936, but that the consequences of what they're going to learn will be far more important for our future.
From the 1950s, there were flying saucers and blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Now they've changed again to the greys and triangular ships, or interdimensional. I think they can only get closer and closer, but is this thing, or this force, or if it is a force, that's my own personal opinion, if this is reality, it's always one step ahead. It's always ahead. We can't catch it, you see.
I don't think we're interfering at all. I believe they've known about us from day one. They can come and go as they please, they've interacted as they please, and they've just let us run with it. And at the moment, they haven't declared war on anybody, they haven't killed anybody that we know of. But what I mean is there's no out-and-out malevolence.
The hypothesis, people can just poo-poo them, that's fine. If anyone slates my opinions or anything like that, they're quite welcome to do so. But I'd like to see them try better, or try harder in their approach, because to me, and I meant that respectfully, very respectfully, I've spent a number of years working so hard to try and form some kind of picture. And this is based on my own research, my own world, of trying to find out what these things are. And I am none the wiser. Really none the wiser.
A lot of us researchers are, pooling all of our resources together and wanting disclosure. We want people to know the truth and then to work towards examining and understanding that truth. Even if we have got that truth backwards, we'll still work towards a better understanding of it.
You can write these books and you can come up with all these theories, as fanciful as they are. But as I said, at the end of the day, you are met again with a blank page. There's nothing. But it is real. This is real because I've seen it.
I just hope that they tell us, yes, they are real, and they bring us that hard evidence to prove that we are not going mad.
Is it all right? Is it going all right? I'm answering everything as I am, honestly and to the book. There's one thing I will tell you about my upbringing. I've told never to lie. I did lie once, In school, I cheated at spelling and lied.
People can fabricate their own stories, generate their own intrigue through ego. We also have those people that really believe that something's happened to them when it hasn't. And of course, embarrassingly, I fall under that umbrella.
You see, this is where it goes. This is your own testimony is questioned, which is fair enough. I don't mind. The thing that I am proud of is that, in a way, I'm privileged more to have seen them. I don't care what other people think. They can call me a liar, they can call me a crackpot, a nut. I don't care, I'm not bothered. I have seen them. And when they are, I've said this all along, when they are hanging over your head, when they are there and you see them, there's something you experience. It's not wonderment and joy. I had no communication from them at all, nothing. It's shock and awe. It's the way they moved, we have nothing. It's like as smooth as glass. We have nothing. No sonic boom, nothing. Nothing.
Sometimes you have to try and justify yourself to whoever you're speaking to say, look, I am who I am, I'm honest, I'm very sane. So it's quite hard when you claim something where there is no proof whatsoever. And as we spoke about, it's like the X-Files with Mulder and Scully when they were so near to the truth. At the end, it turned out to be shadows. They had nothing left.
It's like on the X-Files, isn't it? When they find something, it's quickly ripped away. It started in 1982 in Tatchbrook Road in Middlesex. And I can't remember exactly which day it was, because you're a kid. I mean, I didn't keep a diary, I was bone idle, I was lazy at school. But something very bizarre happened.
I became interested when my twin brother and I had an experience with our maternal grandmother when we were aged 13.
Our grandma was out, and Philip, my brother Philip, contests that she's hanging out washing. I can't exactly remember if she's hanging out washing.
Can't remember if it's afternoon or evening, but we're sure it was afternoon, going back some years now. But there was a gentle breeze and we saw what at first we thought was a balloon, silver balloon.
And all of a sudden, in a nutshell, this, what we thought to be a silver balloon, arched over the rear of the fence and sped towards us.
We realised at that point that it wasn't a balloon because it was moving very quickly and on a seemingly direct trajectory.
It was silver, it was perfectly spherical, about the size of a football. And I was astonished to see that when it came over us, it then stopped and hung over Grandma's head, and I had a good look at it.
No markings on it, made no noise.
And I remember pointing up and saying to Grandma, Philip was saying, "Grandma, look, look." And she turned around and she said the most bizarre thing. She said, "Oh, look, the fairies have come to take a closer look."
We realised at that point it wasn't the fairies and that she was trying to, calm us to the situation.
Now that's a very strange thing to say, but later on we realised she was probably belaying our fears.
We moved towards the bedroom windows on the first floor, then the second floor, and then moved off over and disappeared quite quickly.
It wasn't fairies. This to me and Philip was technology. It was technology. Now I know we're near an airport, but there's no military establishments near there, I don't believe. But even if it was military, I contested the issue that they would not be flaunting high-tech over civilian airspace. They wouldn't even be observing a grandmother with her 2 grandkids. What's the point? They would do it.
My grandmother was psychic, but she never ever mentioned to us that she'd seen UFOs before. But because other members of our family have had some interactions with, on 2 occasions, these orbs, and one with a cigar-shaped UFO that one of my uncles had seen coming out of the ocean in Great Yarmouth. And he was a non-believer, trust me on that one. So when he told me and my brother, I nearly fell off my chair.
My grandfather was told me, you have to be level-headed, but of course these completely wipe out logic.
When they're in close proximity to you and they're above you, you know what they are. It's hard to explain, but it's the only way I can tell it to you, is that they are not from here.
One thing that's ironic is that there's very few witnesses, and I think that's what they want. Sometimes there are quite a few, but more than not, it's isolated. It's quite nasty in a way. I did have the distinct impression we were being watched. It was like an electronic eye. I remembered some sarcasm I had with that, actually stating that line, an electronic eye. One gentleman, who I won't mention, of course, did it have eyelashes? You see, this is what you have to deal with. These know-it-alls, or these people who feel that they're imperial in that subject, whereas I am not. But as a kid, people will contest and say, well, it was a balloon. It was not. When you're there at the time, I can't reiterate enough, that was technology, and very bizarre. So that's how it started.
And of course that really interested me because no one really spoke about it.
But of course, this is the annoying thing about the subject. It's all hushed up. No one must know. You couldn't talk about it. And by God help you if you spoke about it at school. They would just laugh at you. You're an oddity, you were crazy, you're imaginative, you're delusional. They'll come up with anything and everything. The reason why it's hushed up is because it doesn't follow a preferred narrative. Also, fear. This is one thing that I wonder about the powers that be, and perhaps sniff suspect to them, is that they, I'm sure, know more than they're letting on. Much more.
And it wasn't until the event of when we moved from where we lived before, which was Luton, after coming back from South Africa, to a village called Marston Mortain. And at that time I was age 20. So there was a gap between the first initial sighting of what we call a UFO, but it was quite small to be a UFO. My brothers always said that it was an eye, rather like the Foo Fighters in World War II that was spotted. And it was until the period of 1989, the winter of 1989, where the full scale of this phenomena really dug into me. And I had what most people assume was an alien abduction in the winter of 1999 at the village of Marston Mortain.
I have been arrogant. I have been wrong in the past. I denounced something, an idea. And that is terrible for me. It's made me a better person, I hope, in terms of integrity and in terms of trying to understand this phenomena in a sensible, if we can call it sensible manner. Are they already here? I suspect they are. But what they are, I do not know. We don't know. There's something. The best evidence I've come across for UFOs, none.
Interesting. None.
No. There's no evidence. There's no evidence to this entire thing. There's nothing. It's just words, testimonies.
And just as we started down the woods, well, it went up through the trees. Looked like a big cigar shape with light lit from both ends.
And then it seemed to just go together, make a ball, and fly out into that field, and it was a great big, huge yellow glow out there. And then there's another, and it come down, and it looked like big red wheels, like a wagon wheel.
When I looked up, I saw this figure. It's kind of a rectangular shaped head. It had two eyes, looked sort of like light bulbs. It kind of real bright.
Who does have any evidence? Nobody.
I do believe in life on other planets. But God help them if humans come along to their planet, because they'll end up destroying it. I'm not, stating that all ETs are good, some are bad. Just like humans, you've got the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I believe that we as a species need to kind of like step in line and understand that we have to change, because all that most of us do is we destroy, corrupt, and control.
The greatest challenge we have at the moment is raising our thoughts and raising our frequency to an extent that we could be more acceptable to ET that have been all around us all the time. Now, I personally believe, rightly or wrongly, that there are many different races and many different types of ET. They're around us all the time. If I use Christianity as an example, Jesus said the only way to God is through me, because he came as an example, like Muhammad if you like Buddha. They came as examples of pure people. So it's only by reaching their level and progressing yourself that, as an example, that's how you become one with God. Going back to ET, this is, to me, a universal law. They are bound by the same rules as us. They're on their own record trying to progress exactly the same as we are. So it's in their own interest that they don't hurt us. It's in their own interest that they do help.
Most people don't want the truth. They will rather prefer a half-truth or a lie in many things. When you tell them the truth, it's like they can't deal with it. So I think we have to look at this and say, hang on a minute, this is the truth. I'm not talking about all people, because a lot of people are nice people, but the vast majority are not. And we have to do something drastically to alter the way that we think and the way we do things, the way we treat one another, and as well as the planet.
So if you're a good person and you help people and you've got good morals, you've got good ethics, you will move forward. And that is the opportunity that is afforded everybody at every level. And again, why can't I remember what's happened previously, and why can't I remember what? Because it won't be a test. You have to do it now by your efforts. You have to raise your thinking and your vibration and the way that you live your life to progress. So you go back to the record. Each of those grooves on the record is a separate life, a separate lesson, a separate way of us having the opportunity to move forward.
For those who don't believe, I respect that. I really respect that, and I'm not here to convince you of anything, because why should I? It's only when you have that experience, then you'll understand what we're talking about.
The thrill of it is trying to find an answer. It's amusing, really, because you read so many ridiculous answers. And I liken it to a jigsaw puzzle. You have many, many pieces, and you're trying to put these pieces coherently together in perhaps a coherent manner. It's difficult. For me, it's formed a slight, hazy, murky image of what these things could possibly be, or some of them. You know, we're dealing with many aspects. There's so many references to so many different aliens, but I wonder about that myself. I wonder. The only way we can learn is progression. And I wondered, what if, not a majority of them, we're not talking of possible off-world aliens that could exist. We don't know. But what if it was something that could change faces to suit what's in vogue? I don't like nonsense. I know it sounds ridiculous for someone who's seen these things. And of course, people automatically label you as nuts, or because you're an artist or you're into science fiction, that you conjure these things from the imagination. It's always been used. It's an old tune. The building blocks for this is to know exactly what they are. And you know, even today, I will admit, we are none the wiser, but that doesn't rule out constantly pursuing it. The legitimate and honest testimony from good people, you know, to try and find out what exactly we're dealing with. I did state it's possible. You see, I look at all aspects. I hopefully have looked at many aspects, not all. Of them possibly, could it be possible this is a biblical thing? That in the past, demons were mentioned, especially by the churches. Yes, we know to invoke fear. That's one element of it. And if it's to maintain order, it's not a bad thing then, you know, that you embrace morals. But secondly, could it be that it was actually true, that there was a war, a great war with the One, and that there was treason, and they cast Lucifer aside, as we call him Lucifer, or the devil. But he wasn't cast into an ethereal thing we call hell. It's possible he was locked into a dimension. And could it be possible that they, because they're immortal to a degree, they are eternal, that they've risen their ugly heads, so to speak? We have to cover everything. People say, no, 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 no.
The question of whether or not we have good ETs and bad ETs, well, I believe that there may be a mixture of both. The only ones that I can speak about are the greys, because they were the ones that I had interaction with on some small level. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are other species. But as with the greys themselves that I've been looking into, they have a secret program, a modus operandi that they want to conceal from us. And are there higher establishments working with them? We don't know. It's possible, but it's very bizarre.
There is something happening, something. But what we have got, not a clue. I haven't. You'll have other people who state that. I'm not going to argue with them because I said it, you know, before. And, you know, even if they see this, there'll be those, well, you'll get it anyway. It's like a program, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They'll be slating it, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Of course I do. I'm being logical.
With regards to the UFO subject, we only have a bunch of theories. We understand that phenomena operates on levels of high strangeness, where time is distorted. And I do feel myself personally there are two parts to the phenomena. One is when there is a viewing of a UFO, there seems to be some kind of distortion with time and space, whereby the environment changes. You can have three people standing together and only two will see the UFO. It's almost as if it seems to begin to integrate on a personal level of the psyche. And then what happens is that if someone's been abducted, there is a full-on integration of control from this force that operates behind the UFO phenomena, where they integrate themselves on a personal level. And this is probably why a lot of people have different experiences. Although there's a common theme, the same with near-death experience, where they go down a tunnel or they cross a stream. There are general outlines that we can specifically state these are patterns, the same with an abduction, but the overall events sometimes are slightly different. And that could be because the force is integrating itself on a personal level of the human psyche and delving into the mind to bring out what they want. So it appears to me that the Greys especially are, you know, they come across as blank canvases. They don't understand about love, of time, of space, of taste, of aging. It's almost as if they've been robbed of those attributes, so they want them back. And maybe there could be some kind of, and I say maybe, gene splicing or recreation or hybridization of themselves with a part of what we are.
Are they our enemy? Are they a patient, eternal enemy that wish to force us into a technological age of wonderment and horror? And if so, why? Are they changing us to what they once were?
I believe myself that we were the product of gene splicing, experimentation by an extraterrestrial species that amalgamated a part of themselves with the hominid to create a new species. So it's not just looking at the UFO subject, it starts to open up other areas that you begin to suspect and think, well, you know, are the Greys responsible for our genesis? No, I don't think that they are. I think there may have been another species that did that, and that the Greys have found us. And to my mind, they are interdimensional as opposed to, you know, out there in space, because the way they manipulate time and space and memory is very clever. I remember all of it. There were four stages to the experience, and one part of it was something that one of my publishers decided to omit from the book, Believe, Bridging the Gap Between the Psychic and UFO Phenomena, but I'll explain what happened. It was winter in 1989. I'd walked back from the station, and when I got home, my dog Benji was there to greet me, my sister and my brother were there, got my back leaned against the cabinets in the kitchen. What happened at that point was that the atmosphere became very strange, almost electric. And the dog started to react. Our dog Benji started to react to it. He started to growl, and his hackles went up. So I kind of assumed that something was kicking off, or he was being made aware of something that we couldn't see. And that unnerved me slightly. But then my brother did something very strange. As he was standing in front of me, he froze. He lifted his head up to the ceiling, and he said, "There's going to be an earthquake or Grandma's going to die." What happened was that there was this light that came up from what I thought, first of all, was our mother coming back from work early, because the light was quite intense and was coming towards the front of the house where the frosted glass doors were. And my attention was drawn to that area. And immediately, the door to the house started to become almost jelly-like. It was as if the light that was becoming brighter was moving the material, the structure of the door, into some kind of jelly. And it was moving backwards and forwards. It started to, you know, go in and out. And immediately, as my attention is drawn to this force that's coming through the door, I see what I can only describe as a 3-foot-tall, diminutive figure, all clad in black. It had an oversized helmet on its head, and it came through the glass of the door and shot into our bedroom stroke study downstairs. And immediately as that happened, the door returned to normal. My brother seemed to snap out of his trance, and the dog is still barking, and I reach behind me to get the largest knife I can find in the drawer, and I really yell, "There's an intruder in the house." And immediately at that point, this thing, whatever it was, shot very quickly across from the downstairs study, across the hall, up the stairs, and disappeared. We made a search of the property, nothing could be found, and I remembered that I broke down that night because I couldn't explain what had happened. The whole thing seemed unreal, but it really happened. My brother can't even begin to understand why he went into the trance that he did, or why he came out with those random things. There's going to be an earthquake, or Grandma's going to die. And it wasn't until the early hours of the morning that the events changed somewhat into a more negative approach to what we call an alien abduction. Bearing in mind, during that time, I had no idea what an alien abduction was or how it was initiated. But in the early hours of that very morning, I found myself awaking in the hall to where this thing had come through, hovering on my back, 3 foot off the ground, and I'm being pulled through the glass. And my mind's thinking, that's not possible. How am I able to get through physical matter? I wasn't panicked. I was almost like, well, if there's something that's got a hold of me or taking control of me, then I'm just going to go with it. But as I come out into the garden, I'm spun round so that I'm not on my back anymore. I'm kind of like arched round. So I'm 3 foot off the floor looking up at the sky, and I can see what I can only describe as hundreds of UFOs moving very quickly through the sky. And I'm thinking, they're real, they're here. But one of the objects in the sky that did get my attention was a darkish silver, almost like a metallic grey spherical object. And as soon as I looked at it, I felt myself lifting upwards very quickly, and that feeling like being on a roller coaster, like, whoa, something's happening here and I don't like it. And as I come towards it, come right up to it, I black out. And the next part is something that unfortunately I suffered for within the media world, but it was, if you can put yourself in a situation where you don't know where you are, because I immediately woke up and I found myself in a kind of like a medical room. It was very hot. I was naked. I was strapped to some kind of bed. And when I looked to my right, there were 3 tall beings that were kind of like enveloped in this mist. And for want of a better word, the only way I could describe them was that they looked like reptilians. And I can tell you now, I have no interest in reptilians. But they were standing to my right, and seeing them horrified me. One, because I'm strapped and I can't move. I'm being held against my will. And there are these 3 beings that don't seem to have any care for me. To them, I feel like I'm just a piece of meat on a slab. But the other horrific part to this was that I found that there was a foreign implement that had been inserted into the abdominal region, and I could feel it within the stomach area. It felt organic. To me, it felt like rape. It was degradation and completely senseless. And as I screamed and yelled for them to get it out, the next thing that I recall was that there was a small grey being, it was more cream than grey, that came ahead through a slight partition of light that I couldn't see round where I was strapped down. And when I turned to my right, these 3 fellas had gone, and this grey came forward, and the device was being extracted mechanically, I assumed. I didn't see anyone taking it out. It felt like it was being pulled out, and I was ordered to dress. So I kind of like thought, well, this thing's got me out of the situation or getting me out of it. I need to dress. So I dressed into my pajamas, and I was ordered to follow it. And the grey stopped at what I thought was a wall. And I looked at it, and it looked at me, and immediately it wants me out. I have to go. And I'm like, well, how do you expect me to go? And immediately the wall opened to a door. I didn't see a door opening, it just turned into like nothing there. But I could see the village from a last height. And this is where the last part that's very bizarre played out.
Now, we look at the greys, and nearly all accounts of them, nearly all, stress that they kidnap people in the dead of night, they snatch them from their beds, they do it quiet, they try and erase their memories. I don't believe they can completely. As to why, I don't know, they're so advanced. This is one of the queries, why do they keep you awake when they can knock you out at certain points, but they want you to see them? Why is that?
If the media stated on the news channels that UFOs are real and so too are aliens, how then are they going to explain about the procedures of abductions that occur? But what we haven't told you is that there are certain species called the greys that, that come in the dead of night. They infiltrate through solid matter. They can abduct you. They can do experiments on you. They can screen your memory so you forget more times than not, and they'll put you back. People aren't going to be able to handle that. So how on earth are they going to accept the fact that we are being visited by alternative dimensions of reality as opposed to the ordinary belief that they're coming from another star system? So I felt myself being pushed out, and there were two other greys, one on my right, one on my left, but I was told in my mind not to look at them, and I thought that's really odd because I've seen you already, so what harm is there in looking at these two here? But I realized as I'm coming down to our garden, it's light now, it's very early morning, I can see another smaller craft that's hovering by our conservatory and another figure standing under it. And as I come to the ground, I'm horrified because I seem to recognize this, for want of a better word, grey, but it was different from the other grey that I'd seen on that ship. It was more humanized, and my brother has created it through his artwork. I call it Noddy because it had this stupid pointed hat on its head. It had the face of a classic grey, but it seemed more human, if that makes sense, and it wore a one-piece uniform with knee-length boots. Noddy had his arms crossed over like this, and he was looking at me really angry, and I could see his stance. He was quite threatening, and I couldn't understand what I'd done or why he was angry with me. And I thought, no, actually, I'm the one that's angry. You've taken me, you've done these things to me, and you're looking at me like that. I wanted to punch him. I really wanted to punch him, but I couldn't move. It's almost as if I'm held. And he's still angry with me, and I thought, well, there's something I need to ask him. And if he can answer it, I can tell people this really happened to me. I need him to tell me something I need to know. And immediately I thought, how the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? How am I able to get through solid material? And he looked at me quite shocked because his mouth went into an O, and he started to lift his head up very slowly so that he was looking under his craft, and he started to rasp this unintelligible voice that was reminiscent of the voice synthesizer that my twin brother and I had for the ZX81, an electronic voice synthesizer. It was all rasp, and immediately I found myself coming crashing through the conservatory glass doors, and I could still see him, then through the kitchen door, then through the hall, and then bang, I woke up. And I have to state woke up. And immediately as I woke up, I had a nosebleed. I had to go to the bathroom to sort myself out. And the next day, there were 3 marks that were found behind my right ear that were in the shape of a triangle that my brother tried to take with an instant developing Kodak camera. Do you remember those Polaroid cameras? And 3 marks on my right arm here. I had continuous nosebleeds to my right nostril that the doctors were going to cauterize, but after 2 years they stopped, and I found it difficult to walk, and I had increasing problems with my right ear. So that was the general so-called abduction that I went through, but I wanted to explore what it was and why it happened and why it was so real and why it had left physical marks. And another researcher actually found parallels between what my twin brother had done earlier that day, with him going into the trances saying there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die, and with what Noddy, the last alien I saw, had done by lifting his head up and coming out with a gargle. So we're still looking into that application, as though Pierre Sabac, the researcher, thinks that this energy or this force was scrambling everyone's mindset when the initial experience of seeing the small 3-foot black-clad fella came into the house.
Is there a way by which someone's emotions might be manipulated at a distance through some form of electromagnetic means? And the answer to that is very probably yes. Yes.
What happened was that I had another very bizarre incident occur to me in 1996. Since 1989, the initial abduction, as it's called, because we don't really know what it is, I kept trying to work out what this force was, what the greys were. This theory popped into my head. People call it a download. It sounds a little bit sci-fi or Star Trek-y when you say download. But it literally was as if my mind was infused with this whole idea of what the greys may represent, or a certain faction of them do. And this came out in, as I said, a magazine called Alien Encounters. They actually called it Spirits in a Material World, and it dealt with the premise of the greys being clones. And of course, the idea that I had was that if you clone something, my idea is that it doesn't have a soul. or it doesn't have that spark of what we are. As human beings ourselves, we're productive beings. And, you know, we come in through the correct channel of the womb. And my belief is that we carry inherent memories from what we call the other side within this life, not only genetic memory, but also psychic memories. And my whole idea is that as human beings, we come onto the earth and we're born, and then within a blank canvas we build upon memories and experiences that we take back to the other side when we die. And when we die, all the other memories of what we are part of, come together collectively. So if I cloned you in a laboratory, you are the natural process of reproduction. You've come through the correct channels of memories, of experiences, of this whole connection of creation. But your physical clones are, I assume, outside the field of creation, which means that they have no past and no future. They will have the memory of one single incarnation, and that's it. And when that copy dies, the theoretical question of whether or not the spark of that soul is strong enough to get back to source where you as the original copy has come from. Now, what are the Greys interested in? What are they interested in? They're interested in reproduction. And the way that they abduct a person, I discovered all the way back then, was very similar to what we call a near-death experience. And this is what led me into looking into the psychic part of human consciousness, not only the abduction phenomena, but also life after death, the continuation of consciousness, the soul as they call it. And when I looked at the data, when I was putting it together, I thought, well, hang on a minute, the abduction phenomena is almost identical to a near-death experience, but one is more times than not positive, the NDE, and the abduction is not. Because when you're abducted, normally the individual finds themselves being moved through solid matter. And if that's the case, then the Greys may be taking the real part of what you are, the soul, your consciousness, and as they bring it into their field of vibration, you will be matched by that density so that full interaction can take place. The same with the near-death experience. When someone dies and they have this experience of leaving the body and going into the light and meeting their loved ones, communication is also done via telepathy, the same with an abduction. And the biosphere of the soul, or the etheric body, if the physical body that's left behind has been diseased or is an illness, normally when they've returned from their journey, well, they have to return in order to report the NDE, they are cured. It's almost as if the NDE heralds a complete readjustment of the structure of the etheric body, bringing it into its correct vibrational level, and as it returns to the body, brings the whole physical mass up to its correct frequency. With an abduction, that's why scars are left, marks are left, implants are left. So my idea was generally that these Greys have probably cloned themselves out of existence, and that they have come to us, this planet, that deals with reproduction. The way that they go about the abduction process is covered under, darkness. Obviously, they don't want any form of interaction with us as humans. It's as if they want to keep their project silent. I've never been regressed, so I recall all of that as it happened and when it happened. And nothing's been added, nothing's been taken away. That's all I recall from it. And it was very horrifying. I mean, people, they can laugh or joke about it, but to me it was one of the most life-changing events ever. Trust me when I tell you that when you're in their presence, that changes everything. People will tell you what they think you saw. They didn't see what you saw. So for those establishments of power who continually deny the reality, then I'm afraid, they need to be open about this, because we want to know the truth.
People will then state, their military technology. No. I watched them move, you see. This is another incident. I watched them move. They also managed to suspend time, not mechanically, not by the watch, but I suspect they froze the area so no one else conveniently would see them. And the road where it happened is always busy, not a peep. There was some kind of bubble, I would call it, over the area, where I noticed something very interesting. Is when we spoke and they were above us, 90 feet up, the three of them, three orbs, when we spoke, it's like when it snowed heavily, your voice sounded like that. There was a change then. The sound was different, it did something. And it's only afterwards that I realized, you know, it's only afterwards when you come away with this subject, you have to come away and think about it. Because when you do, you start joining the dots.
The last UFOs that we had observed was on the 9th of April 2016 that occurred at 11:15 at night. That was witnessed by other people, and these 3 spherical white objects were stationary over our house. They were massive, but they'd been clocked by my niece on their way to us.
They invoked some kind of shield or something to prevent the outside world or any influences from seeing them. Always when you're alone, isn't it? Or less few people, always.
We haven't seen anything since then, but when you are in that situation of high strangeness, it changes everything, but it still hasn't answered anything for me, because I remember thinking, here we are again. There you are again. What are you trying to tell me? What do you want me to know? Why is everything secret? You see, this opens up other areas that were previously closed, and then it leads you down a corridor of more confusion. But I will say they are real, but not what we think they are.
They just whip people up and do what they want and paralyze them. So I certainly will keep digging. And I dare say that my answers today will be very different from those tomorrow. And that's, in a way, that's quite frightening for me, because I wonder what angle it will take, but I will embrace it. But it's quite disconcerting, really, because it's like, are you going to slide or slip? Are you going to climb that mountain? Or are you going to just slip off, you know?